What's up, everybody? We're back with another $2 deck tech for the 2DH format. It's a format created to have a new meta for Commander and make the game more accessible for new players or players who don't have a ton of money at their disposal to spend on Magic. It also forces you to be a little bit more creative because you're dealing with cards that are all under $2. Some of which are very powerful, some of which are pretty bad. I've got a couple of them to tell you about right now with my Edric Spymaster of Tress deck. Now, I'm kind of a Johnny sometimes, and that means cards like Gravitational Shift are sort of exciting to me, I hate to admit. But I see a card like this, and I know it's bad, but I think to myself, could I build a deck where this is one of the best cards in the deck? And that's just what I've attempted to do. Edric likes to have flyers anyways, so building a deck around this Gravitational Shift card seemed like a fun concept for a $2 Highlander deck. With green-blue, you're just trying to ramp and have more cards than your opponent. Edric's going to provide a lot of the card draw, and there's tons of cheap early ramp that you can run in a green deck. All these cards pretty much accomplish the same thing. As far as getting some additional card draw, we've got Military Intelligence. You only have to attack with the creatures. It doesn't matter if they deal damage, and you'll get a card. Bident of Thassa and Coastal Piracy provide a backup plan for Edric. He's oftentimes going to get targeted, and these cards are a little bit more difficult to remove since they're enchantments, and they really help you rebuild your board state. Because your board state's generally going to get blown up a time or two, which makes delve cards like Treasure Cruise pretty easy to cast. Lets you just get right back in the game. I run a couple of cards, Long-Term Plans and Merchant Scroll to dig for some win conditions or counter spells to protect my board. And you're going to need some counter spells because a lot of people have seen this guy. They kind of know what he's up to. It's a little bit compelling at first to not kill the Edric player, but if you're playing correctly, you just want to deal with this guy. So because of that, you need a fair amount of counters. You're mostly worried about countering board wipes. This card is really fun and has a ton of upside. If you counter something that's expensive, it's very easy to, on your next turn, sort of empty your hand with the free mana and then leave mana up for additional counter spells, such as Counterspell or Dream Fracture. Negate, Swan Song, and Muddle the Mixture are all really good against wrath effects. There's quite a few still legal in the format. Day of Judgment, End Hostilities, Merciless Eviction. Those are all the greatest enemies of this deck. Foil is a fantastic card because when you're playing aggro, you tend to tap out. You're trying to just get going as quickly as you can. And you often have some extra cards in this deck, so discarding an island and a card that's irrelevant to the board state at the moment is a small price to pay to counter one of those board wipes or targeted removal spells that will wreck you. Simic Charm's also just a nice little counter spell for targeted removal, and it can do a couple of other things in a pinch if you need it. Swiftfoot Boots makes a ton of sense in Edric. You need to protect him as much as possible. Try to make some friends. Again, if they're playing right, they'll kill you first. So I've got like 35 creatures in the deck, because that's kind of what I'm doing. And usually Edric builds run just tons of cheap, unblockable guys. And I'm trying to do the Gravitational Shift plan, so I've got a lot more flyers than your average deck, which makes the deck a little bit unique and fun. And it also lets you play a lot of utility cards. These two guys will bounce your opponent's creatures, get you a little tempo. Riftwing Cloudskate is great. It can get you out of tons of situations. If somebody has a propaganda or something like that, it lets you just swing for victory. Dungeon Geist can tap down an important creature. Hypnotic Siren, great early in the game, and also can steal the most important thing late in the game. Trigon Predator to get rid of those pesky artifacts and enchantments. Nothing feels as good as blowing up like a Staffin' or something against a control player with this card. Horizon Chimera, it's one of the only forms of life gain, which is occasionally relevant. Sometimes there's a Heartless Head of Segu deck or something that's racing you. Generally, you're going to be the fastest deck, but in a pinch, this is nice. And it's also got Flash, which is very relevant. Alchemist Refuge, Horizon Chimera, these kind of cards really help when you don't want to overcommit to the board, or you want to bluff that you have a counterspell, or you actually have a counterspell. You can continue to build your board state on your opponent's end step and then immediately untap and get some combat going. Recent addition here. In a pinch, you can also counter a creature spell. Pestermite, also flash creature. It's also a rogue. I have these rogues in the deck for a very specific reason, which I'll go over a little bit later. Wingcrafter can give anything flying that doesn't already have it, like Edric, who's also a rogue. And you're going to have a ton of cards by playing this deck. A lot of them are going to be bad, but you just want to get them out of your hand, build up your board state as much as possible. Cards like Cloud of Fairies and Peregrine Drake are pretty much free spells that let you not have to discard your hand size or let you hold up a counter spell while continuing to build your board state. And Saprozin Legate, this is not a card you see every day. I would not recommend this for decks other than this one, but it's really funny, and oftentimes it's like a turn 1 free flyer. Waterfront Bouncer, you see this in like Cube once in a while, not really an EDH card, but when you play an Edric deck, sometimes you just have tons of cards, and just being able to bounce that one guy, or even protecting your own guy, can be relevant, and you have cards that you don't need anymore. Just tons of efficiently costed flyers here, nothing really significant to go over. Just trying to fill up that board state. Got a Fairy Conclave for a little bit of reach, one extra body in the air. And on to the good cards, or at least good in this deck cards. Although this card's good in pretty much any deck that runs these colors. Probably the best card in the deck. Just like Edric, people tend to want to kill this thing as quickly as possible. Probably the best card in the deck. It just lets you empty your hand. It speaks for itself, really. Warden of Evos Isle, really nice for building up your board state quickly. If you got a few of those 2-drop flyers, you can make them cost 1 instead and get yourself right back into the game. Clone, Cryptoplasm, Stolen Identity, these are just great utility cards. You can copy your Prophet of Kruphix to sort of protect it against a single removal spell in a pinch. Also nice, I mean, you're playing blue, none of these creatures are too impressive. You can get a Bogarden Hellkite or whatever else is going on in the game at the time. And Stolen Identity is just a fantastic card. You're often going to get 2 or 3 creatures out of this thing, and you have any number of evasive creatures to cipher this onto. Spiketail, Hatchling, Drakeling, and Drake are really fun cards in this deck. They provide great synergy to both the flying theme to draw cards and to protect your board state. They also go well with these clone effects. I've had a game where I had like 2 or 3 of these Drakelings and like 2 or 3 of these big Drakes off of a Stolen Identity all at once, and it was a multiplayer game and no one had died yet, but I was able to out-tempo 3 other players, which is really difficult to do in an aggro deck. But when you have, you know, essentially what's like a Condescend for, you know, 12 or 16, you can pull that kind of thing off with this deck, and it's a lot of fun. Another way to go off is this Royal Elemental card. It's also a flyer. For one simple land drop, you can take the best thing in the game, and if you get this combo going where you've got a terrain generator to do it at instant speed and a Prophet of Kruphix, I mean, all you really need is a counterspell and a couple of lands, and you're going to get there. It's going to be really hard for people to slow you down at that point. Taking extra turns is always nice. There's not a ton of ways to do it in 2DH, and I'm not crazy about this card, but in this deck, you're oftentimes on board state 2 or 3, so there's plenty of cards in your graveyard, and you can fire this off for 3 or 4 mana and get yourself right back in the game, or you can use it as a finisher, even if you're having to spend a lot on it. Sometimes just one more turn is enough to kill the control player that's tapped out or doesn't have an answer. Notorious Throng is one of the other ones, and this is why I have some of those not great rogues in the deck. For 6 mana, you get an extra turn and a whole bunch of guys, depending on how much damage you've done. So putting all those bodies in the air to draw some more cards, on your extra turn, you're just going to wreck somebody. It's a really great card in the deck. Knowledge Exploitation also has a prowl cost. Kind of a utility card. I mean, you're not super sure what you're going to get out of this unless you've played against the person and know that there's something useful in there, but sometimes it's just going to hose somebody. Stealing like a Worst Fears or something huge can be a really powerful effect, and for only 4 mana, you can cast this fairly early in the game just by doing damage with Edric. Overrun and Triumph of the Hordes are 2 of the other big finishers in the deck. Not the nicest card to play with, but you do have to end the game, and Triumph of the Hordes is a way to take out at least the control player, and at best 2 or 3 players at once, if they have allowed you to build your board state up enough and no one has an instant speed answer. And every good deck needs a backup plan. Praetor's Council is the backup plan of choice for this deck. Notice you're going to have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game, meaning if you get to start going off again with all of your flyers and card draw, you're not going to have to discard, and you can just get all of those problems that people have already solved back in your hand, and it's a really frustrating thing to play against because people have generally expended all their resources trying to stop you already. So again, that's my Edric deck. I could have built it better, but part of the fun of this format is being creative and kind of making the deck unique, doing something that other people haven't done. Check out the links below if you're interested in 2DH. We'd love to have you join the group. We've got a Facebook thing going. I'm going to try to get more of these deck techs out from other players so you can see what we're all about. Thanks for your time.